Hello and welcome to the June edition of On the Horizon, our monthly podcast dedicated to helping you navigate through the tricking world of golf course turf maintenance by helping you to look and think a little further forward. I'm Henry Bechley from ICL.
And I'm Glenn Kirby from Syngenta. And it's June, Henry.
It is.
And to mark the beginning of true agronomic summer, I've written another poem.
Oh, well done, Glenn. More of the same.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
In the Shetland Isles, the sun won't rest. Golf courses bask. We're truly blessed. Temperatures rise, the frosts withdraw. At last the temperatures we all long for. Heat and drought may bring challenges and stress. Excess growth in June can make a mess. Embrace the warmth as solstice draws near. Agronomically, June's the finest time of year.
Always a joy, Glenn. So how many more do we have left of this?
Just 9 left now, Henry, and then my book of poetry will be complete, placing me in the Agronomist Poets Hall of Fame. It's going to be a monumental achievement when I get there. But I've also got some other news, Henry. News on our award.
Whoa, it's all happening this month, isn't it, Glenn? Is it good news?
You're just going to have to wait and see, Henry.
Oh. Okay, Glenn, so let's start, as usual, with the weather data for June. And because this is the time when we move into true summer, I'm assuming at last that you will have some positive news for us rather than the usual doom and gloom.
I might put that on my business card, Henry. I quite like it. Glenn Kirby, harbinger of doom and gloom. Got a nice ring to it.
It does. Or maybe just Glenn Kirby, HDG. Anyway, where are you taking us this month? To get a feel for the weather across the UK and Ireland in June.
Okay, this month, as June gives us the longest day of the year, I thought we should visit some summer solstice venues.
How exciting. So I presume that you are a druid then and have the full regalia?
No, I'm not. But I did look up what to wear at the summer solstice at Stonehenge on the English Heritage website.
Oh, great. White robes, pointy hat and sandals, I presume?
No, not quite. So this is what it said, and I quote, "Make sure you wear and bring with you warm clothing, as even in June, the weather at Stonehenge can be very cold and damp. A small umbrella may be a good idea, although do be aware large umbrellas are not permitted."
Well, that's to keep the golfers out, isn't it? Do you know you really are HDG, aren't you?
Indeed. So we're going to visit Stonehenge at Salisbury, the bunch of rocks that I drive past when going west, and my point of reference when explaining to Americans where I live.
Yes, and of course the scene of the legendary Rock Festival in the 1970s.
Indeed. We are also going to Newgrange in Ireland, which is a prehistoric monument in County Meath, about 50 miles north and slightly east of Dublin. It's an exceptionally grand passage tomb built in the Neolithic period around 3200 BC, making it older than Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids.
Well, that sounds good, Glenn.
Indeed. And then we're also going to go to Bryn Celyn Ddu up in Wales, Anglesey, the very top west of Wales. And don't laugh at my pronunciation. I checked it with my Welsh wife and she said I was correct. That is one of the most famous Neolithic monuments in Wales, Henry. It's an amazing tomb with its opening aligned so the sun shines directly into the inner chamber just once a year at dawn on the summer solstice.
Ooh, that's spooky and a bit Indiana Jones.
And of course, we're going to our furthest point north, the Shetland Isles, where there are 3 golf courses, I think, and where the sun barely sets at all in the midsummer. So in the Shetland Isles, midsummer, we see about 19 hours of full sunlight and nearly 5 hours of twilight there, compared to the south of the country, where we only get about 16 and a half hours of full light on the longest day, with about 3.5 hours of twilight.
So some historic sites this month, Glenn, where our ancestors were probably looking towards their own horizons, but to worship rather than to make forward-looking agronomic plans.
I'm not sure that was on their agenda.
Okay, so let's stick to our home turf and start with the moisture situation. And here we are looking to compare the total gains for the month, the rainfall, with the moisture lost through evaporation and transpiration, the ET, to give us a net total for the month, which would then factor into our own site characteristics.
Indeed. So let's go driest to wettest to start with. And we're looking here at the last 12 years of data. So Stonehenge in Salisbury in the south of England, an average year for them in June, they are 70 millimetres drier at the end of the month than they are at the beginning. In a wet year for them, they are 28 millimetres wetter, which is probably more than I was expecting, if I'm honest. And in their driest years, they are 132 millimetres drier.
Whoa, okay, so a real possibility for courses down south to dry out, but it's certainly not guaranteed, even in the south. Because wet weather can still commonly occur even there in June. Hence the recommendation to take your umbrella to the henge and, of course, wear waterproof robes and pointy hats.
Indeed. So next is Newgrange in Ireland. An average year for them is 43 millimetres drier at the end of June than they are at the beginning of the month. A wet year over there in Ireland is 74 millimetres wetter, which again is more than I expected. And in their dry years, they are 94 millimetres drier, Henry.
Okay, so a bit of caution is needed here because although it can be dry, it can be very wet too.
Indeed. And the next on our list is the Shetland Isles, the northernmost point in Scotland. And did you know that the Shetland Isles became part of Scotland on February the 20th, 1472, when they were pawned by the King of Denmark, Norway and Sweden to James III of Scotland?
No, I didn't know that. Thank you, Glenn.
Well, you do now. Well, an average year for them is 6 millimetres drier at the end of June than at the beginning. In a wet year, they are 53 millimetres wetter, which is about what I was expecting for them. And in their driest years, they are about 50 millimetres drier.
Okay, so in their driest years, they only lose 1/3 of the moisture lost in the driest years down in the south of England, which is really interesting.
Yep, the wettest, as always, though, is Wales. An average year for them, they are 4 millimetres drier at the end of June than at the beginning. And in a wet year, they are 124 millimetres wetter, which again is a lot more than I was expecting, even for Wales. And in their dry years, they are 86 millimetres drier.
No way. So on average, this part of North Wales might be break even in June, but actually it looks like they could be all over the place. And so, once again, Wales is showing huge variables. And never really seeming to settle down. And sort of similar to Ireland, I think, in that regard. But in Salisbury and in the Shetland Isles, it looks like they are more consistent in June.
Yes, potentially still serious possibilities of being wet in Wales and Ireland, and also the potential, along with south of England, to be seriously dry, with the Shetland Isles probably, as you say, the most consistent place to be.
So whilst the Shetland Isles might not see the extremes, my money is certainly on it not being blessed with decent temperatures either. I presume that it is relatively cold up there in June?
Well, let's have a look at the overnight temperatures. Overnight in the Shetland Isles, they are averaging 8 degrees, with the coldest they've seen in recent years being just under 4 degrees.
Oh, so not really cold, but still sort of being less than ideal for growth and maybe sort of borderline conditions at times, like we were describing for May elsewhere. But it feels like even in the extreme north, they will have unlocked consistent growth by now.
Yes, June is when the handbrake comes off consistently for everyone. Okay, so if we go over to Ireland, they see an average of 8.6 degrees overnight, with the coldest temperatures down to 1 degree, but that's pretty unusual for them to hit that.
Okay.
If we go up to Anglesey, we see average temperatures of 9.7 overnight, which is the mildest out of this lot, with a minimum of 4 degrees they've seen in June in recent years. And in Salisbury, we see an overnight average of 9 degrees with a coldest of 1.5.
Okay, so we can still see occasional frosts at the beginning of June, particularly in, I suppose, cold microclimates or in sort of low-lying pockets on golf courses. But in the main, we're experiencing consistent growing conditions with fairly decent overnight temperatures. Okay, so what about the highest temperatures? How warm can we get in June? We've already seen that there is the potential for it to be seriously dry. So do we see any heat stress arrive in June to compound that drought stress that might have built?
Okay, so average high temperatures are Shetland 13 degrees, Anglesey 17 degrees, Newgrange 17.5 and Salisbury 20.5.
Okay, so those averages are pretty decent everywhere, except the extreme north, obviously. What about the extreme highs, though? What June high temperatures or highest temperatures have we reached in recent years?
Well, the Shetland Isles have maxed out at 19.5 degrees, but everyone else is sneaking up to 30 degrees as a June maximum. Salisbury is the only place to have snuck over that number, just scraping over 30 degrees.
Okay, so we are now into summer, hopefully, and are feeling some heat on our backs, all being well, and growth has properly kicked in. So how do our Primo Max application intervals look around the country in June? You know, we have a range of locations this month, you know, extending quite far north. And so I'm interested to know, you know, what frequencies we should be applying our favourite plant growth regulator to get the best out of it.
Of course. Now, we tend to use growth degree days here to help us guide us towards the best intervals for our plant growth regulator applications, as the breakdown or the longevity of the product will be heavily influenced by the temperature. The warmer it is, the shorter a period that product will last. Now, June isn't the hottest month, but it is when we start to settle out and be consistent at last. Now, over the last 12 years, Salisbury, they've averaged around 13-day intervals in the month of June. Anglesey and Newgrange have averaged 15 days as their normal intervals, and the Shetland Isles have averaged at 19 days.
So a bit of variation there. But how much does that vary between a warm and a cold June then? Okay,
a cold June, if we got a really cold year, that would push Salisbury to 14 days. Anglesey would be stretched out to 16 days. Newgrange would stretch out to 17 days, and the Shetland Isles would stretch out to 23 days as our recommended Primo Max interval gap.
Okay.
Now, if we had a warm June, we would obviously see it swing the other way. So a really warm June for Salisbury would be a 12-day interval. Anglesey and Newgrange would be a 13-day interval, and the Shetland Isles would be an 18-day interval. And I think this is where people start chasing the numbers with GDD a little bit too much. Once we've moved into this settled weather, just try and lock your spray windows in at around 14 days, because that will work for most people. You know, in the far, far, far north, you may want to move that closer to 21 days. But for most, it's now 14-day intervals, which will work with a regular spray program, and that will help you get the best out of your PGR programs until about mid-September, which is when the temperature starts to become a bit more unreliable again.
Okay, but that's for the greens, isn't it? What about if we are using Primo Max across the wider course?
Okay, so the longer the turf is, the more the Primo is taken up. And there's some interesting data from the States looking at this that we should take some time to study someday. But the kind of general point it makes is on higher heights of cut, we get longer control out of our products. Realistically, though, I think for the wider areas, kind of fairways, roughs, things like that, intervals are going to be driven by your budget rather than an actual GDD program. But if you can aim at a 21-day interval in these really high growth periods, That's going to give you enough control to get you through until that drought starts to regulate that turf for you.
Okay, well, that's clear, very clear, actually. So to summarise the weather, June actually might not be quite what we think it's going to be or are hoping for. Heat stress is potentially in the game, and there is a real possibility for significant drying out along with extended periods of intense sunlight, that we might expect during the summer to bring some combined stresses, but it also might be that we get wet conditions with the grass growing like crazy. It does feel like things have moved on from May, but not necessarily into idyllic conditions yet.
Indeed.
Well, and that begs the question, I think, Glenn, what do the golfers expect us to deliver in June?
It's a good question.
Okay, so we are properly into the season now, Glenn, and we know that golfer expectations will be high or very high at this time, which is okay because this is probably the best time to present a golf course too. So, from your experience as a course manager, Glenn, what makes June such a golden time for greenkeeping?
Well, June is a time when everything finally comes together on the golf course. Those divots are recovering, seed is germinating, the seed heads on greens have in the main passed, the weather conditions are generally more favourable, and the courses tend to be in peak condition. So golfers at this time of year will probably get lush green fairways, particularly with 2023's wet spring that we've experienced. They'll tend to see well-maintained greens because we've reached that consistent and decent growth. Greens should be strong because those stresses haven't really started to mount up yet. And those greens aren't yet tired. We haven't beaten them up yet unless we've pushed them crazy hard in the spring to try and get some surfaces through that very difficult period. So all in all, this should make for a very enjoyable playing experience. And we haven't yet moved into those serious stress conditions, which can start to sneak in later on in the month.
Yeah, but in some years we can see drought conditions develop in early June, can't we? But such problematic dry conditions around that time have generally originated from dry conditions earlier on in the year through sort of March, April and May. And I suspect that after such a mixed spring this year that we're not in that territory, are we?
No, I don't think we are this year.
Okay. Generally, though, after such a wet spring like we've just experienced, dry conditions in June generally make for a good June, don't they? Well, for golf anyway, but we do need to be aware that a dry June might be the beginnings of a difficult July if hot and dry weather continues on. And that can present problems, can't it? Most people will have enough irrigation water to get them through a dry June, but the budgeting of limited water resources can be a pause for thought this early on in the season, especially if we're looking sort of, deep into the summer. But, we've got to remember that above all, it's most important that we take good plant health into July and August, because that is the time when the pressures can really start to accumulate, and we really need to be in good shape and prepared for that.
Yep, but this year with a wetter spring, which was a frustration at times, I suspect we're going to go into June with a fairly reasonable soil moisture level, meaning the onset of that drying out could well be delayed. That's, of course, unless we see a really extreme May.
So this year, June should be a happy time for greenkeepers then. Conditions are looking like they're going to be in our favour, hopefully, and the course should be coming together and both looking and playing at its best. And we can all hopefully look forward to some positive feedback from the golfers. But knowing them as we do, Glenn, what are some of the, shall we say, challenges that they might throw at greenkeepers in June?
Well, managing golfer expectations is always a challenge. And although we're probably now close to our best, we still won't be able to compete with the major golf tournaments, things like the US Open or even that high budget venue down the road. Golfers will be inspired at this time of year to get out and emulate their favourite champions. And they may well be also arranging some summer golf breaks and comparing you to high-end venues that they visited on holidays. And, it's at that time where we all chuck our clubs in the boot and we disappear off to our golfing venue for a few days away. And at least that's what I'm doing this year. So you will be compared to those venues they're visiting. So it's, it's kind of essential for greenkeepers just to make the most of these conditions they have. And in June, that's odds-on favourite to be the best time of year. So we can start to produce some pretty decent playing conditions whilst managing those heightened expectations.
Yeah, it is essential at this time that we do try to remain focused on our own venue and delivering our own targets, and to sort of try not to get too knocked off balance by some possibly emotive or comments from out of left field.
Yeah, let's just hope those golfers also remember some good practice, some good golf course etiquette, pairing divots, ball marks, all that kind of thing. It all goes a long way to helping to maintain the course's condition to everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, we remain hopeful about that, but also, we must view damage repair as our responsibility as well, of course. But as you say, June should be a great time to deliver fantastic playing conditions, beautiful course presentation, and it will hopefully, quite simply, be a time to enjoy being out there.
Indeed, and make the most of it. Make sure you take a break, because July is just around the corner, isn't it? And that's when those stresses can really begin to compound.
Yeah, they certainly can.
So, Henry, what are we thinking agronomically in June?
Well, there is always plenty to think about agronomically. And with there being the potential for horrendous levels of growth, maybe, if it's a wet June, it could be a chaotic time. And so we need to have that clear focus on our key priorities, which of course starts with meeting our play and quality targets for the greens, as well as presenting the wider course, of course. And so monitoring is needed to help keep us firmly on that track. And as previously discussed, I think that the key area of focus for the greens at this time should still be on surface smoothness.
Because agronomically, you think that a focus on smoothness will help to keep you out of trouble.
I do, because a singular focus on endless green speed usually leads us down a path of lower cutting heights and increasing management intensity.
Yep, increasing management intensity makes things really difficult agronomically, because it just puts us on a knife edge of stress and disease.
Yeah, I mean, you can do what you like as far as I'm concerned, but that way is a really tough one to navigate, isn't it? Especially if the external stresses that we can experience at this time of year begin to mount up. They might just send you over the edge. I think, as an agronomist, it's good to have a strategy that gives you a bit of agronomic breathing space, to keep you out of that serious trouble.
But focusing on surface smoothness will still help you hit your speed targets, but it's just a different mindset. It just allows you to approach this in a different and less agronomically risky way.
Yeah, look, and it's as simple as looking at the roll of a ball or how smoothly it is running when taking your stimp meter reading. things to help you decide what it is that you need to do to make that roll smoother.
And you advocate scoring it using the STRI scoring scale, don't you?
Yes, I do, because it allows you to track your progress and build a record of your scores, which will help you to understand what works or what doesn't. And it will make you think about those influencing factors such as, nutrition or the use of Primo Max or light top dressings, mowing frequencies or double cutting, things like rolling, turf ironing, that kind of thing, and that whole process will, help you to set the right balance, won't it, at any given time? If you score the rolls and are keeping a record of your results, it will help you to learn from them and help you get better at preparing those surfaces. Greenkeeping is always a fine balance of many influencing factors, but something that helps you tune into that has got to be a good thing.
Yeah, but people don't adopt these kind of new trends too readily, do they?
No. Well, it's hardly new, Glenn, is it?
No.
But it couldn't be simpler. Essentially, at this time of year, when reviewing the surface smoothness, we're just looking at the proportion of either chatter, where the ball exhibits minor oscillations during the roll, and periods of complete smoothness, where the ball doesn't vibrate. And if the ball is chattering throughout the roll, then it is a score of 6 out of 10. And if the roll is completely smooth, but maybe with a single minor chatter or snaking event, then it's an 8. And if it is half smooth and half chattering, then it's a 7. It's really quick and easy and always really interesting. You will need to get low down. So the sort of, behind the stimp meter is the best position to see the roll properly. Maybe score 10 rolls in a couple of locations on each of the greens that you're looking at, and just take the average and note that down. But the key or the point of this exercise is to understand what is causing the chatter and what you need to do to increase the proportion of smoothness. Is it brushing before cutting, or a light top dressing, or rolling or turf ironing, verticutting or grooming to improve the sward texture, nutrition or Primo Max to maintain sward density, stress alleviation to prevent that thinning out. It might be tweaking the height of cut slightly or improving the quality of cut. You need to just kind of think what needs to be done. You just turn the dials based on your desire to improve the roll of the ball. Through the month of June, our job is probably going to be to move the surfaces from a seed head influence score of 6 maybe, or 6.5 at the start of the month, to progress through 7 and aim higher towards 8, where smoothness is dominating. But I should say that a 7 is a good surface from the player's perspective, with a putter in your hand. But at this time or through the month, we should probably be targeting hitting 7.5s and 8s if we possibly can, where smoothness really dominates. But we should view June as being a transition or a progression rather than feeling like we have to achieve that all at once. Remember, you're turning the dials gently to tune things up, but we want to do it in a sustainable way.
Yes, because we are all using those same agronomic dials. We're not just using the one height of cut dial. These tools or dials, they all contribute towards producing better surfaces that are easy to manage or easier to manage, and not so on the edge.
Absolutely, Glenn. Being an agronomist, it is my job to advocate lower risk strategies to achieve our goals, isn't it? So anyway, there are wider agronomically damaging occurrences that can also arise at this time that aren't self-inflicted, that we need to guard against as well, because they can also affect the integrity or the smoothness of the putting surfaces at the time when we are striving to perfect them. I've never scored a 10, by the way.
Okay, so what else are we guarding against as we all become absorbed with the roll of a golf ball?
Yeah, well, we shouldn't get too distracted, because we have diseases and stresses to contend with at this time that can destroy our surface smoothness. And ultimately, what sneaks up on us will largely depend on which way the weather drops.
Yes, and the weather in June was actually a bit of a surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. As always, Glenn, I'm so glad that you take the time to run through it because, each month I proved myself wrong in what I'm expecting. But I was surprised how sort of variable or how unsettled it can be in June. But the upshot is that we'll probably have good growing conditions with a likelihood of some moisture in the game, but also maybe some stresses, hot, dry or bright conditions. And so with that combination, it might well be a time for some disease activity to emerge.
Yes. And I remember microdocium patch disease outbreaks being a fairly common thing at this time, but nothing too damaging or long-lived. With turf growth pretty consistent at this time of year.
Yes.
It wasn't anything that I needed to target a fungicide application at to combat it, but it was there.
Yeah, and we shouldn't really be complacent either because, damaging attacks can occur, but they are unlikely for microdocium patch at this time. Whitear patch is also fairly common, especially down south if moisture is in the game, and that one can look quite frightening, but it doesn't generally tend to add up to much.
No, damp conditions coupled with those conducive temperatures might well be a recipe for fungal activity in June, mightn't it?
Yeah, in all its forms, and so we need to be on guard for that, especially during damp June conditions. And if the maintenance pressure is on the limit in terms of mowing heights, maybe coupled with insufficient nutrition, then that might drive the development of anthracnose, which can be widespread and extremely problematic, as we all know.
Yes, we do need to strike a really good balance at this time and not let the pressure build up at what is still quite an early stage in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of greens nutrition, we tend to be into our liquid programs at this stage and probably delivering around 2 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per week on average for those annual meadowgrass dominated parkland settings. And we just need to be sure that that it's set at the right level, really, that it's enough so we don't fall into that anthracnose trap. And of course, those levels might be too high for fine grass dominated heathland or lynx greens where there isn't such a need or desire to push so hard with the cutting heights. You just need to do what's necessary, really, for your own situation and not get sucked into worrying about what other people are doing or what they're saying they're doing.
That's right. We just need to try and keep things somewhere towards the middle agronomically.
And if we're still thinking about disease activity developing in June, then the development of take-all patch might be in the game, especially but not exclusively for susceptible sites, newish establishments where bent grass is dominant, and particularly where the root zone has a high pH or where the irrigation water is alkaline or contains high levels of calcium carbonate. In those high-risk situations, which are actually quite common in Ireland, for instance, then a preventative fungicide policy might be in place. Because if take-all patch disease develops, then it can be devastating to putting surfaces or indeed wider turf areas. But of course, we should always be taking a fully integrated approach to fully reduce the risk of attack with the use of nutrition to maintain plant health, moisture management, mainly to reduce the level of irrigation if that's an influencing factor, and the use of things like Greenmaster liquid effect iron, which also contains trace elements including manganese, which also, seems to really help in these situations, all dovetailed with that fungicide programs to hopefully keep a lid on things. We've got some really nice data from an SGRI trial on take-all patch disease from a few years back that really shows the benefits of these non-fungicidal methods that help slow down the development of the disease. So Glenn, what fungicides should we be using in this situation?
Okay, so Heritage, containing the active ingredient azoxystrobin, has always been the go-to in this situation and is really effective effective against take or patch disease when targeted properly. Azoxystrobin's got root uptake, so it can move upward from the roots through the crown and the root areas that pathogen kind of infects. So that's how it becomes so effective in there. For Ireland, if the risk is already high and a programmed approach is necessary, then Acernity, whilst not labelled for take-all, can have some positive impact if being used around this time for the other on-label diseases that it has. We've got some good data with it on take-all patch from the USA, and it's a very broad spectrum fungicide. But with both fungicides, they're both most effective when targeted preventatively and integrated into wider integrated turf management strategies.
Yes, and of course, if the irrigation water quality is a driving factor, then that would need to be dealt with, if possible, with a dosing system or such like. Okay, so other soil-borne fungi might be an issue as well in June, such as those that cause the development of fairy rings, which can also be extremely problematic, but this time on drier sites such as links and heathland courses.
Yes, this can be a particular problem for the link settings, can't it, where type 1 rings can result in the loss of grass cover in affected areas, and this damage can last until the end of the season. That damage can also be quite widespread, and again, integrated approaches involving the use of quality surfactants, targeted irrigation, they all help mitigate any decline. But Heritage is labelled for fairy ring, and Acernity for those in Ireland is a very broad spectrum fungicide too, so if applied around this time can have a positive impact. And all of it can be used to improve or prevent or really limit that fairy ring development.
Yeah, all forms of fairy ring actually can be troublesome at times, but generally we only use fungicides against them when we're facing significant damage, because they really are such a hard target to hit, aren't they, being so deep-seated?
They are, and it's a long-term program, really, years of work to try and keep them under control. But if you're going with a fungicide program, the recommendation for Heritage is 2 preventative applications targeted in the vulnerable areas with supporting aeration and surfactants and soil targeted water rate. So we're aiming for 1,000 litres a hectare, followed by appropriate levels of irrigation to help that active ingredient get to where that fungal activity is. You know, we really want to move that active down into the soil profile and into that zone of fungal activity.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's dollar spot, isn't there, waiting in the wings at this time, which is attracting more and more of our attention. And we will chat about that a little bit later on, because with dollar spot, we also need to employ the use of prediction models to help us gauge the level of risk and direct our integrated control strategies.
Yes, and we'll get into the Smith-Kearns model predictions for these areas in part 2.
Yeah, and annual meadowgrass seeding might still be a cause of surface unevenness, and that is something that we discussed last month, with the use of plant growth regulators being a part of our wider integrated approach.
We did indeed.
Yes, and of course we have already mentioned that wet or damp conditions in June might necessitate the use of Primo Max across the wider course if we are experiencing, those prolific levels of grass growth that can be extremely problematic, especially on those heavy soil-based parkland grass factory type settings.
Yes, this is where the use of Primo Max as a management tool can really come to the fore and help keep the management of the course under control, let alone the cost of not having to mow so frequently.
Yeah, Primo has such huge benefits, doesn't it? Especially during times of prolific grass growth, especially if staffing levels are an issue, for instance.
And fuel consumption, of course.
Yeah, which is a huge issue these days.
And we touched on those GDD-based Primo intervals for greens earlier on, and they can be widened out, as we discussed a little on fairways. But I'd suggest getting right on top of that programme on wider areas if your budget allows, as that will hold you in a really good position going into the stressier months that are on that horizon.
Yeah, and stress management or mitigation can be really important at this time if we experience heat waves or prolonged periods of dry weather. and which might be an issue in certain areas of the country. And so we need to be thinking carefully about our moisture management strategies.
Yes, that's right. Monitoring our soil moisture content and targeting our irrigation, as well as selecting quality surfactants and using them as part of our fully integrated approach.
Yeah, and sort of managing the heat stress and even sort of light mitigation, might become top of our agenda if conditions really ramp up during those sort of longer days that are starting to occur in June.
Yes, that's right. And I'm going to talk about stress management and stress mitigation in part 2, because it can be directly damaging, but it can also be an influencing factor on things like the development of diseases such as anthracnose, dollar spot, and even red thread. And we'll touch on that later on.
Yeah, there's plenty that we can do in this area, isn't there? But we need to be looking onto that horizon, because prevention, as always, is better than cure.
Indeed. And our horizon might be extending into preventing next year's pest infestations at this time of year as well, by controlling the development of young chafer grubs. And we are getting very close to some acelepryn details, and we will be talking about our acelepryn label in more depth next month, but today we're going to talk a bit about chafer grubs later on.
Yes, and of course there's those weeds that might be developing through June, becoming more and more stubborn and difficult to control if we allow them to mature too much.
Yes, and we spoke about the launch of Overtake and how beneficial it was to get on those broadleaf weeds early. And Overtake, of course, is our new selective herbicide.
Yeah, so agronomically, June might seem to us to be relatively straightforward, but depending on how the weather drops, which could be either way, combined with your individual site characteristics, of course, then there seems to be a whole host of problems that might be in danger of developing. That you will need to nip in the bud nice and early before they become damaging and ruin your year.
Yeah, we seem to say it every month, Henry, but greenkeeping is not easy.
It never is, Glenn. Okay, so there are plenty of things to think about in June, and in part 2 we're going to embark on a whistle-stop tour of those main issues just to make sure that we are ready for them.
We are, Henry.
But before we do that, Glenn, it's time for a tea break.
Oh, it is. Shall I get the kettle on this time, Henry?
Yes, why not? I really need a brew after that.
So, welcome back to part 2 of the June edition of On the Horizon, where we're going to have a quick run through of the main issues facing us at the start of summer.
Yes, and it is clear that although conditions will likely be in our favour, we still need to be on our guard because the weather can easily conspire against us and cause some serious problems if we're not careful.
But first, Henry, let's have a cuppa.
Ooh.
What are you on this month?
Well, this month at the Ilkley office, we are working our way through a Wittard's gift set.
Very nice, Henry. You've been splashing out.
Always, Glenn, but not in this case. It was a very kind gift from a greenkeeping colleague. Thank you very much, Richard. And I must say that the mango and bergamot really tickled Ed's fancy this month.
Very nice. And I've also heard a rumour that you've jumped back into the world of greenkeeping.
Well, in a way, Glenn, I have helped to look after a bowling green in the past, and now I have been lucky enough to be conscripted to help out at my local club. Although I'm not sure how helpful my efforts have been so far, but it really is great to be a part of a greenkeeping team again.
And this is crown green bowls, isn't it, rather than
Yes.
flat? You know, the green's got a big hump in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, this one's got 3, I think. But yes, all crown greens are unique, and our one is an absolute peach. And so under Richard, Bernie and David, I am volunteering my services to help with the green maintenance. And it is an absolute treat. And we are already scoring the smoothness of the roll and focusing on the surface firmness to get the green running properly without having to shave the height of cut down too far.
Well, that does sound familiar.
Yes, it does. And we are already talking about fashioning a ramp to measure the ball roll distance from a standardised delivery.
Oh, no, Henry.
You got to practice what you preach, Glenn.
It sounds great, Henry. And are you playing again?
Well, I think I'm going to start again, actually, because it's the whole point, really, isn't it?
Very good, Henry. And the other development last month was that we did our very first On the Horizon live and uncensored event for Des the lecturer and all the MVQ students at Suffolk New College.
Oh, we did, Glenn, didn't we? And it was great, actually, wasn't it? And many thanks to Robert Ransoms for hosting the event and for looking after us all so well.
Yeah, it was really good to meet everyone and do whatever it was that we did.
Yeah. Yes, it was a bit random, wasn't it? In the end, I think we told them our life stories as if that might be inspirational in some way.
Oh, it's cringeworthy. Yeah, more cautionary, wasn't it? And we also got onto our secrets of success, didn't we?
Yeah, which seemed like a bit of a liberty and also cautionary, I would say. I suppose it just depends on how you define success, Glenn.
Indeed. And so if you aspire to be an incoherent buffoon, then get in touch. We will gladly come along and show you how it's done.
Yes.
And we're even talking about building in some costume changes next time.
Yeah. That really would do the trick, to properly tell our life stories and our secrets of success. I think the sky's the limit, actually, as far as I'm concerned.
But one of the topics we did stumble upon was that of AI, or artificial intelligence. And so that got me thinking, Henry.
Oh, did it?
Yes. I asked ChatGPT to write an article on turf diseases in the style of Henry Besham.
So not an agronomic limerick ode, then?
No, one of those is enough.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Look, have you got it? Do you want me to read it?
Oh, yeah, why not? Let's see if we can tell the difference.
And this is absolutely genuine, is it?
Absolutely.
Well, send it over. I'm ready and waiting for it.
Sent.
Okay. Right, here it is. Yes. This could be a game changer, Glenn.
I'm really hoping so, Henry. I'm hoping I can get to work with a digital you rather than the real one.
Yeah, not sure about that. Anyway, okay, wait a minute. Where is it? Here it is. So, with the future of turfgrass agronomy, in the style of Henry Bechley, I will read this. Right, where am I? There we are. Okay. As I survey the verdant landscape before me, I cannot help but lament the rampant turf disease that plagues many a golf course, park, and residential lawn. Alas, the bane of the greenkeeper's existence. It is a foe that must be faced head-on with vigour and knowledge.
That's one of your more colourful days, Henry.
First and foremost, one must be able to identify the enemy. Common culprits include the nefarious dollar spot, whose telltale silver dollar-sized patches on stems and leaves are sure to send shivers down any greenkeeper's spine. The fearsome brown patch is also a formidable opponent, causing unsightly brown patches in the grass and wreaking havoc on the roots. And let us not forget the dreaded Pythium blight, a ruthless pathogen that can decimate entire fields of turf grass in a matter of days.
Well, I tell you what, if Dickens wrote turf articles, this is it, Henry. This is definitely one for the Order of the Auger.
But fear not, dear reader, for there are weapons in our arsenal to combat these afflictions. Foremost among them is prevention, which involves maintaining optimal growing conditions for the grass and implementing a sound turf management program. This includes appropriate irrigation, fertilization and mowing practices, as well as proper aeration and thatch control.
Well, that's all fair enough.
Should the disease rear its ugly head, despite our best efforts, targeted fungicide treatments may also be employed.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the reactive approach recommended by Digital Henry.
It is critical to choose the correct fungicide for the specific disease and apply it at the appropriate time and in the correct manner. Careful monitoring of the grass for signs of the disease's spread is also essential.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed and surprised it hasn't mentioned my application tip of the month.
In the end, this is a battle that requires both knowledge and dedication. Armed with a comprehensive understanding of the disease and its causes, and a commitment to sound turf management practices, we can emerge victorious over the scourge of turf disease.
What do you think?
Well, it's either insulting or depressing. I quite liked the Winston Churchill vibe, but it didn't really feel like it was written by me or it sounded like me.
No, that's right, Henry. Nothing like you. Couldn't be more different.
It did actually remind me of Jim.
Anyway, Henry, come on. I also asked it to write a tea drinking anecdote for you too.
Well, that's good.
I've sent that over to you too.
What, to save us?
Yeah, come on.
Okay, right. Here we go. Are you trying to get rid of me, Glenn? Is that the point?
It's just a bit of fun, Henry.
Okay, right. Okay, here it is. Right, so this is an anecdote about a memorable cup of tea written in the style of Henry Bechlin. Right, let's see how this goes. As I sat sipping my tea, I couldn't help but be transported back to a small village in the heart of England. The aroma of the tea leaves filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly baked scones and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside. But it was the taste of the tea that truly captivated me. It was as if each sip contained 1,000 stories, each one more enchanting than the last. The flavours danced across my tongue like a well-choreographed ballet, and with each sip I felt as though I was being transported on a journey through space and time. As I savoured the last drop of my tea, I realised that it wasn't just a cup of tea. It was a moment in time and a memory that would stay with me forever. And for that, I was truly grateful. Well, that's too good, isn't it, Glenn? I really liked that. There must be a ghost in the machine.
Yeah, your days are numbered, Henry.
Yeah, it was a bit Alan Bennett, which is good, obviously. Gosh, I don't know what to think, really. Neither, actually. It kind of felt... I mean, I'd like to take credit for the tea one, but I don't think I would have written that. But look, honestly, I suppose I could say that at least I existed. And of course, this means that I am now truly immortal.
Anyway, on with the whistle stop tour.
Yes, best move on, Glenn.
So, Henry, we're now moving into anthracnose and dollar spot season. It's time to take stock and ready ourselves for the battle.
Yes, because we have the significant potential for both heat stress and moisture stress in June, don't we?
And of course, our own desire or the customer expectation to push things harder than maybe we should.
Yes, and so our strategies for the prevention of both these diseases do have some common ground, because both the diseases will be looking to attack weak plants, at a time of excessive leaf moisture. And so in the case of anthracnose, we'll be looking to reduce the risk of attack with considerate maintenance practices, sand top dressing, reasonable cutting heights, and adequate nutrition.
And with dollar spot, generally on those wider areas, we want to be thinking about adequate soil moisture, reducing leaf moisture, and regular and adequate nutrition.
Okay, so let's take a look at managing moisture and heat stress, as well as that temptation or the dangers of pushing too hard. And also we need to look at how that dollar spot pressure is beginning to ramp up now.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, Glenn, so we're moving into June when we might experience some serious heat. It probably isn't the hottest period of the year, but there is still a likelihood for it to get stressfully warm, especially, but not exclusively, down south. And so we might be thinking of the ways in which we would want to mitigate that stress.
Indeed, good watering practices are essential for managing heat stress on the golf course. And it's important to monitor those soil moisture levels regularly and adjust irrigation strategies accordingly. Overwatering can lead to shallow root systems, softer greens than desired, increase the risk of potential disease, and also encourages the surfaces to create more thatch than we desire. But underwatering, of course, can cause drought stress and reduced playing qualities.
Yeah, we do have to set the right balance, don't we? And so good wetting agent choices and programs will play a critical role when we're thinking of managing heat stress, won't they?
Yes, the best way to manage canopy temperatures is to allow the plant to regulate its own temperature by ensuring it has adequate moisture to transpire properly. Once the plant loses that ability to transpire because the moisture levels are too low, then it loses the ability to regulate its temperature. I remember a particularly challenging summer with high temperatures and intense sunlight where we were using a cheaper wetting agent and it just wasn't providing the results we needed. The turf was stressed because it was dry in high heat and it couldn't cope. And then we started to compound those problems, increasing heat levels, low soil moisture. The plant was then weak and overheating, and we left ourselves wide open to stress-related diseases later in the summer. And I've seen similar things in our trial data since joining this side of the industry. The best place to start with coping with those summer stresses is a good wetting agent program, monitoring those volumetric moisture contents, and good solid nutrition to allow the plant to function properly.
Yeah, a timely reminder of the importance of using premium wetting agent technologies like Quilibra and TriSmart, but also, monitoring those soil moisture levels. I mean, I think we all know, don't we, that sort of accurate soil moisture probes are essential tools for greenkeepers if we want to, monitor soil moisture contents accurately, to allow us to target or sort of manage specific moisture content levels to agronomically suit particular grass types. For fine grass dominated link situations, we might be targeting 15 to 20% volumetric moisture content, but for annual meadowgrass dominated parkland greens, we might be targeting a slightly higher level of 20 to 25% VMC.
Yes, premium wetting agents do provide better water distribution and retention, ensuring that the turf receives the necessary moisture to withstand that heat stress. And let's not forget, of course, the impact of UV light on turf too, especially as we approach the longest day of the year. That UV light can cause significant stress on turf, leading to a weaker plant, reduce photosynthesis, and increase susceptibility to diseases.
Yeah, it's really, really important at this time of year, and something that we need to be aware of, isn't it? And we know that Rider can the turf pigment rider can help protect the turf from harmful UV rays and also reduce heat stress. And so using pigments like rider and monitoring soil moisture levels closely, greenkeepers can maintain healthier turf and mitigate those stresses to help reduce the risk of conditions like dollar spot and anthracnose developing.
So, to summarise, maintaining good moisture levels is critical during this time of year. We should avoid overwatering or underwatering and instead focus on providing the optimal amount of water for what we are aiming for by using premium wetting agents, monitoring moisture levels with moisture meters and protecting turf from UV light. By adopting these practices, we can go a long way to protecting our turf down the line.
So in terms of stress mitigation, Glenn, Syngenta have been doing lots of trials at the SCRI for the last couple of years now in this area, haven't they?
Yes, we've been examining anthracnose and the role of high cure. And we've also been looking at nitrogen and its impact on that anthracnose pressure, as well as the best fungicides in our portfolio for an anthracnose control program.
Okay, so what did you find out?
Well, in our trial, we found out that using high cure reduced anthracnose pressure by about 50%. And that was without using any fungicides.
Yeah, high cure contains around 10% nitrogen, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And in last year's trial, we compared it to another nitrogen product, your very own Greensmaster Liquid High N.
Very good. And so how did they compare?
Well, interestingly, we observed an immediate early response from the Greensmaster N that we didn't see with the high cure. And this isn't a surprise, as high cure is slower acting nitrogen source compared to the Greensmaster, which is urea based and readily available at this time of year. And that led to a much slower start to the anthracnose pressure in the Greensmaster N plot, with the high cure treated plots being much worse than the Greensmaster Greensmaster N, but still greatly reduced compared to the no added nitrogen.
Oh, that's good. And we know that delivering the right amount of nitrogen at the right time is a critical defence against anthracnose.
That's right. The nitrogen-treated plots began the trial with much lower pressure than the others. And we had a solid base program going on, a base fertiliser program going on. So it wasn't like we were running them lean. We were delivering a reasonable amount of nitrogen. Clearly not enough, though, as adding that 1.2 kilograms of nitrogen, which we did in the High Cure and the Greensmaster product, every fortnight, was enough to significantly reduce the amount of anthracnose we saw.
Okay. Well, that shows that sort of, adding quite low levels of nitrogens can still be really influential.
Yes, really influential. And while the Greensmaster N program showed early benefits, the High Cure program did catch up later in the trial, resulting in a 50% reduction in anthracnose pressure from both of those two products. This suggests that regular and adequate nutrition combined with high cure during times of stress could be an effective strategy to reduce your pressure.
Very good. And so what about the transition from anthracnose to microdochium patch disease pressure later on?
Well, we found a significant reduction in microdochium patch pressure with the high cure compared to the Greensmaster product. And we know that finding that effective N rate is important, and high cure probably delivered that at a steadier rate. And the added benefits of those amino acids would have helped too during the stress periods during the summer.
Yeah, well, in September, we wouldn't generally recommend the sort of Greensmaster Liquid High N for obvious reasons, but it does show that sources of nitrogen are also really important at certain times of the year, as well as the level of nitrogen. So everything needs to be taken into account. All right, so what about the fungicides?
Well, the FR321 one-box solution performed incredibly well, even with a slightly curative approach. That mix of 300 grams per hectare of heritage, 2 litres of medallion and 1 litre of rider is highly effective and continues to perform well. However, it is not recommended to apply 2 FR321 treatments in succession. So in Ireland, we suggest using a Cernity in a tank mix with rider as a strong programme alongside FR321. And in the UK, we recommended Strata Elite with 1 litre of rider in that as a partner. But overall, FR321 is the best product we can find on the market for anthracnose control.
Brilliant. And so what about the timings?
Okay, well, it's probably not June unless we go into some serious stress. But for a fungicide application for a difficult site, we should probably be bookmarking around the 1st of July as the start for that programme. if we are identifying ourselves as high risk. But the high cure, we should probably be thinking about that on 14-day applications at 10 litres all the way through June, if we know we are pushing the boundaries of good practice and relying on low cutting heights, lean on nutrition, or really drying things down to get the surfaces we need. If we are in that position, then we really need to consider a little bit of extra protection by adding high cure into those tank mixes. Think about using a granular, maybe late June or early July, and lean on that supporting technology like Rider to help you through those stress periods.
Okay, Glenn, as you mention it, what about management pressure and the dangers of pushing too hard too soon?
Yes, it's very possible. I've pushed greens too far, and I would imagine most people have got a story or a situation where they've done it too. I do remember one particular one, a par 3 cross-country competition that we held during Masters weekend once. We set the course up with these awesome short par 3s. It took ages designing them, ranging from 90 yards to 190 yards. And we had some really creative and interesting pin positions as well. It was great fun. Everyone gathered in the clubhouse afterwards to watch the Masters, and the whole weekend just had this fantastic vibe.
Yeah, I remember this story, but you pushed things too far.
Yeah, sure did. I got a little carried away, made those greens super challenging and a little bit too slick. A whole team played, so I wanted to impress everyone in the clubhouse and get the lads a pat on the back and a free pint when they went in afterwards. We lowered the cutting height by probably more than we should have done. We double cut, we rolled. Looking back at it, I regretted it all year long. I was just showing off really because I knew I'd be hanging out in the clubhouse afterwards.
Yeah, and that ended up causing you some problems, didn't it? But mainly with people's expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. From an agronomic standpoint, it was a terrible move. The year was already tough enough to manage, and later in the season, I had to deal with all sorts of anthracnose challenges, particularly on my sand-based greens that we had.
And so was that directly related to that day, do you think?
You can't really tell. I just don't know. But I do know that my members always wanted those super slick surfaces from that point forward. So I was kind of backed into a corner of pushing the greens harder than I should have or wanted to.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? All right, well, what about the televised tournaments that you've worked on then? I imagine those surfaces would have come from a more planned approach rather than just shaving them down.
Yeah, that's right. The par 3 event was very much a last minute, oh crap, what can we do tomorrow type mindset, whereas the tournaments were always planned months out. Regular top dressings, optimum feed timings, careful grooming, sensible planning on aeration windows, all aimed to peak at a particular time. And rarely did I get caught out on those tournaments because the expectations for those tour events were nowhere near what people think they were. I was doing these in the late 90s, early 2000s, and 10.5 foot was generally what the tour would expect at that point, which was usually fine to achieve for 4 or 5 days with sensible planning and investment. Tournaments usually came with an additional budget and a bit of preparation leeway, so much more achievable than in normal day life where we try and do that every single day with limited time and budget. And I've been caught out more often pushing for speeds when I have no money or time than I have when it was planned for. Planned approach means that you put the right products, the right fertiliser, the right dressing and the right fungicides down to ensure your safety, and just kind of keeps us in that much safer middle and achievable ground, much safer. If I look back, though, the one mistake I regularly made through that 2000s period, in the early 2000s, was wetting agents of those tournaments. The technology has moved on hugely since then, but I don't think I ever really got that one right in those days in the tournament prep. Decent wetting agent would definitely be part of my preparation now.
Yeah, interesting. And it's always important to stay in control and stay focused on the bigger picture, I suppose, and not get caught up with the sort of trials and tribulations of the moment. Those smooth surfaces didn't come from just dropping the height of cut and those quadruple rolls. They came from a fully integrated approach and knowing the risks and putting all the correct measures in place to be able to deliver it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay, Glenn, let's move our focus on to dollar spot and take a look at what the Smith Kearns model says about the level of risk that might occur in June for a couple of our locations. So where are we going for this, Glenn?
Well, I'm going to concentrate on Anglesey and Salisbury.
Okay, Salisbury, which is in the south central inland area of England, and Anglesey up there over in the northwest of Wales. So what do we see?
Okay, pressure is definitely ramping up in June, Henry. In May, we were seeing an average of 1 day above 20% on the Smith-Kearns model in both Anglesey and Salisbury, which is lower than the sites we looked at last month.
Yes.
Now, when we move into June, though, that changes. Anglesey are now averaging 10 days over 20% on the Smith-Kearns model, and Salisbury averaging 5 days over that 20%. Now, Anglesey is probably higher than I thought, and Salisbury is probably lower than I thought.
Yes, I think that's, I'm surprised by that. And I suppose that points to the fact that dollar spot doesn't just prefer higher temperatures. It's more to do with like consistent temperatures or decent overnight temperatures and higher humidity.
Yeah, and hence why Anglesey is higher. If you remember back to the climate data, Anglesey's overnight temperature was the highest, and as it remains mild but not necessarily hot, and it's just got a higher chance of being humid. The higher temperatures we experience in Salisbury aren't always a dollar spot driver.
Okay, so those were the averages, which we know quite often hides the detail. So can we delve a little bit deeper into both of these, please?
Yeah, of course. Salisbury, we've had 4 years above 10 days of over 20%. That was 2016, 17, 18 and 19. So that would have felt like a pretty nasty run of it.
Yeah.
And Anglesey have seen 6 years of more than 10 days over 20%. That's 2011, 12, 14, 2016, 17 and 18. But Anglesey have hit much higher figures. In 2014, they had 19 days above 20%.
Wow.
And 2017, they had 25 days above 20%.
No way.
So we're not yet at our peak, but we are starting to see how some years the pressure can be really ramping up by the end of June. Ready for July, which tends to be the peak month for both of these sites.
Okay, so I presume that means that we now want to be employing as many of those cultural practices as we possibly can in June, especially for those like previously affected sites, because the pressure is building. And, you know, of course, it will be higher for some places than others. And, you know, in some years, that was really interesting, wasn't it? You know, the risk will be significantly higher than others. So we just need to keep an eye on the situation.
That's right. But July can really kick, and it does seem to do it fairly consistently. So the more we do now, the easier it is to survive that July period and then the back end of the season. Now is the time to think about that regular nutrition. Think little and often, which isn't always easier on wider areas, or even those controlled release products may come into play.
Yeah.
Good moisture management is critical. Dollar spot does thrive in dry soil. So utilisation of well-timed wetting agents is important.
Yeah.
And of course, we need to think about dew removal. Can we think about changing up our mowing orders so different fairways sit damp for different periods of time? Can we dew them off? Can we get a rope out to rope off fairways? I know these are labour-intensive operations, but these operations will help. And whilst it's not possible to do this year-round, if we start really studying that Smith-Kearns model, which you can Google and you can download templates to put your details in, that online template is great to help you tune into those disease pressure periods that most greenkeepers can really sense and almost smell fuzz or microdochium patch developing. They know the conditions of that. But I'm not convinced we know the conditions for dollar spot anywhere near as well. And this model will help us turn those dollar spot periods and make us really aware of them and help us prevent the disease and the pressure ramping up next month.
I think you're absolutely right, Glenn. Okay. For those who've been following social media, you may be aware that we're going to lose the Heritage Max formulation. So, Glenn, can you just clarify the reason for this and also those dates of revocation for sale and use up?
Sure can. Last sales and distribution are 24th of June this year, 2023, with the disposal, storage and use up of existing stock on the 24th of March 2024.
Okay, so there's a bit of time there to use it up, but there's a sort of the clock's ticking if you want to buy some.
Yes.
Okay, so why is Heritage Max being revoked?
Well, it's not because of the active ingredient, Henry. That's the place to start. Heritage or azoxystrobin has one of the safest active ingredients on our list, and that's why we are keeping Heritage water dispersible granules. The issue with Heritage Max is one of the co-formulants, which no longer meets the required specifications.
Okay, so it's due to one of the constituents that go into the formulation.
Exactly. If we didn't have an alternative, we would have started reformulating it a couple of years ago. But with Heritage WDG still available, it's unlikely we'd be able to beat its performance. So we're focusing on Heritage WDG, which is still a great product.
Yes, it is. So we're not losing Heritage altogether, and all the existing advice still stands. It just means that after March 2024, we will only have the WDG formulation available.
Yes, that's right. The Heritage WDG is such a good label as well and remains a key part of our summer fungicide program. We've got 4 applications permitted a year on that label with microdocium patch, take-all, anthracnose, brown patch, leaf spot, rust and fairyling all on that label. It's really nice to be able to rely on our old friend Heritage.
Okay, Glenn, it is now officially chafer beetle season. So when do we normally see the beetles emerging?
Okay, in a normal year, we'll see them start to emerge sometime around the end of April and then run through May and June, occasionally into July, and then they reoccur again in September. Normally, I get a bit of a sighting and a bit of feedback, but I've not heard too much about them this year.
Might be the cold spring. And we've also got quite a bit of variance, don't we, here, because we're dealing with a wide range of species.
Yes, we are. Welsh chafers, cockchafers, garden chafers, and summer chafers. All quite easy to identify in the beetle form, but not quite so easy in the larvae form. You've done quite a bit on that in the past for lawn care companies, haven't you? It's not too easy, is it?
No, yeah. Well, I have spent many an hour examining chafer grub rear ends under a microscope, but it's not too difficult when you get the hang of it, and the differences are very clear to see.
Okay, but it is important, isn't it? As it will help us understand our strategies and what sort of levels of control we are likely to get from any products or integrated programs. Because all of the chafer species have different life cycles, which means they are only susceptible to control methods we may have when they're in their early stages in that first year. So for some species that will reside in the soil for 3 years, we have to get on a program to help manage these pests.
So when we talk about integrated management programs, I assume we're including acelepryn in that.
Well, that's part of the solution, Henry, and within the next month we'll be giving out all the details on that. But for the UK, acelepryn, I think, is only ever going to be part of that solution.
Okay, so we don't want to jump the gun, but I'm assuming we'll need to think about how to use acelepryn within our wider programs, along with our sort of other integrated strategies to help us achieve effective control, rather than just relying on acelepryn as being, a sort of total solution.
Indeed, and as with everything, it seems, in this podcast, we are now talking fully integrated strategies that include plant health, soil moisture management, nutrition, physical management practices, chemical control, biological control, and digital help to support the application timings. Yeah. This is really just a great example of how turf managers are having to embrace so many more skills in the modern day.
Yeah, but it's good though, isn't it? And I think, I think a lot of this, is common sense, and we can handle these things and just get better results if we're sort of taking a broader approach. All right, so let's focus this month on those kind of best practices then.
Look, timing is really important with these chafer grubs. But we have more range with chafer grubs than we do with leather jackets, as these soil pests are less mobile. I would say it's really important at this stage of the year to be monitoring and logging those chafer flights, so you really understand what chafer species you have. And if you couple that up with your records where you had problems last winter, that will help you prioritise where to place your resources and your time.
Yeah, we do need to keep an eye out for beetle activity and also report them to onto Pest Tracker, don't we, as the sightings come in. It tends to be May, June and July, doesn't it, from past experience. But you can also check into Sean's Greencast advisory blog as well for updates on what's happening with the sort of Pest Tracker numbers. You know, it is essential to send in all your sightings because it can be really helpful, not only for other users, but just for us all to get a better understanding of the dynamic and how best to approach control measures.
That's right. All inputs into Pest Tracker are gratefully received. They do really help guide the industry.
Okay, so apart from watching out for the beetles, how else can we go about monitoring for chafers?
Okay, so this is more about monitoring for the beetle when it flies at this time of year. So it's all about understanding what we're looking for and identifying that beetle. There's a nice section in the Syngenta Turf website to support you with your identification. We can also monitor those soils, but that's a bit more useful in the late winter months when we're seeing the damage. And that time of the year, we can simply pull back the turf and look for those small white grubs. And we should now be really getting into the habit of documenting where we see that damage to help guide our applications later in the year.
Yeah, and of course monitoring is really important because chafers do tend to infest the same or similar areas each year.
Yes, and more news next month on that Acelepryn label.
Okay, Glenn, so tell us, what's the application tip of the month?
Well, today I want to have a little chat about the importance of involving new or less experienced staff members in your spray operations.
Now is this on the back of, it's coming back to me now, on one of our chats that we had with Des and the NVQ crew down at Ransoms?
Yes, I asked the whole group who was involved with spraying, and nobody put their hand up. Very few had even sat on a sprayer. No one had even read a label. Now, these guys are going to be doing their PA1s, PA2s and PA6s soon, and they've never looked at this stuff.
Yeah.
There are so many fantastic opportunities to pass on valuable knowledge and skills that can benefit both the team and the golf course. So this month, I thought I'd dive in and see if we can find some ideas of how we can make this happen.
Good idea, Glenn.
Okay. Firstly, it's essential to help newcomers and early career greenkeepers understand what goes into the spray tank. Encourage them to ask questions and explain the different products, their functions and the importance of proper mixing. Remember, we were all beginners once and we all needed that one person to come up to us and say, come on over, come and have a look at this. That's the foundation of knowledge. That's the beginning. That's when that interest is sparked. And a spark of interest can set someone up for success in the long run.
Yeah, that is so important, isn't it?
It is. Now, next, get them involved in maintaining your spray records. Make them do your paperwork. This is a crucial task, and it not only helps with the compliance, but also provides insights for them into how different treatments will affect turf health. It is a perfect opportunity for less experienced staff to learn about the impact of their work.
Yes.
Now, let's get them involved and hands-on. Now, get those early phase greenkeepers to sit on and assist you during spray operations. This experience will help build their confidence and their understanding of the sprayer. You can train them to spot issues like blocked nozzles and encourage them to take the initiative in resolving these problems. This will also help them keep an eye on your sprayer when you're actually out spraying by yourself. The more eyes you've got on those back nozzles, the more chance we have of keeping those greens streak free.
Yeah.
Now, lastly, let them have a go at spraying non-legislated products that don't require a spraying certificate. That experience will give them a sense of responsibility and help them become more comfortable with the equipment by fostering a supportive and educational environment. That's how we help to grow new staff members and we help turn them into skilled spray operators. This investment in their development not only strengthens the team, but also engages those future generations.
You know, this is so important, Glenn.
But no, Henry, most people are so keen to do this when you talk to them.
Yeah.
And they're probably all shouting at me right now saying, we do try, Glenn, honest. But ask yourself, honestly, if you're listening to this, have you actually done it? Because a quick straw poll when we went and had a group of young greenkeepers in the room tells me most of the industry isn't doing it. Now, if you're on the other side of that and you're an up-and-coming greenkeeper and you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, they never asked me to sit on a sprayer, you need to ask yourself as well, have you ever shown an interest or have you ever actually asked them, can you get involved?
Yeah, very good indeed, Glenn.
It's so important, Henry.
So that's it for another month, Glenn.
Not quite, Henry. We still got some other business.
Oh, go on then.
Well, firstly, and it's the reason we're a bit late this month, we need to scrutinise your Eurovision predictions. How was it, by the way?
Oh, well, it was the best time ever, Glenn. Thanks for asking. For both me and Charles, and it is something that we will never forget.
Not great for the UK or Ireland, though.
No, as predicted, Glenn.
Yes, and Croatia was indeed truly bonkers.
Yes, they were.
But in terms of your specific predictions, let's have a little look. Charles said Sweden.
First.
Finland.
Second.
Norway.
Fifth.
Austria.
15th, but that was a massive fan favourite.
And France.
Which came in 16th, which was an absolute travesty in my eyes.
Very good, Charles.
Yes, he did do very well there.
I hope some of you put some money on that. Look, you had some outsiders as well, didn't you? So one of yours was Denmark.
Well, they didn't qualify for the final, Glenn.
Serbia.
Well, they did qualify for the final, but they came in at 24th.
Estonia?
Well, this was remember, they were outsiders, Charles had taken the favourites, but they came in 8th, which was really good. Yeah.
So at least Charles seems to know his stuff.
He does indeed.
And on that note, I've got some other news. I've got the results of our Spotify award poll.
Oh, that was a bit desperate, Glenn, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But doesn't matter, does it? So in answer to the question, what is the best turf podcast presented by Glenn and Henry, we've got some news.
Have all the votes been checked and verified, Glenn?
They have.
And was it just Charles, Glenn?
No. Charles and 3 other voters.
Okay, very impressive. So are we good to go, Glenn?
We are. And so, I am pleased to announce that we are indeed officially the best turf podcast presented by Glenn and Henry.
Whoa! Fantastic, Glenn. I can't believe it.
Oh, we did it, Henry, at last.
We did, Glenn. According to Charles and 3 other nutters, this is a massive endorsement.
And on that bombshell, I think it's time to say thanks for listening to our award-winning podcast.
Oh, unbelievable. Yes, thank you, everyone. I don't think I can say any more. I'm just too emotional. I really am. This is amazing.
And we'll see you all next month.
Yes. Take care, everyone. Together, we are unstoppable.
Oh, hold on, Henry. I've been waiting for this moment for years. I've prepared a speech.
Oh, go for it, Glenn. This is brilliant.
I thank you so much for this Best Agronomic Podcast Award. I never thought that talking about turf management techniques could lead to such recognition.
Is this Chat GPT?
Shut up. First, I need to thank my co-host and my partner in podcasting crime, Henry. None of this could have happened without your witty humour and your ability to make complicated agronomic concepts easy to understand.
Oh, my pleasure, Glenn.
I want to thank all of our loyal listeners out there: Matt, Yeston, Bledge, Phil, Keith, Des, Gordon, Charles,
Thank you all.
and all the rest that continue to support us and leave such kind reviews. Your positive feedback keeps us going each week.
Yes. Do we get any feedback?
Thank you to all the experts out there who've taken time to be guests on our show. Phil, Tom, and the people behind the scenes, those who shared their knowledge and insights to make our content even better.
Yes, thank you all. We couldn't have done it without you.
And look, to all the turf managers out there who work tirelessly to create smooth surfaces that keep golfers happy. We created this podcast to hopefully provide you with some small help along your journey. This award is as much yours as it is ours.
Yes.
Look, and finally, finally, I need to thank my amazing parents who've supported me through my so many random endeavours on life. Even something as niche as an agronomy podcast. And thank you to my wife who still listens to every single episode. Even the really boring ones about pesticide resistance are still claims to enjoy them. Angela, you are my rock. So once again, to all 4 voters out there, thank you so much for this incredible honour. This is a wonderful validation that agronomy truly is the most interesting science in the world.
Wow, well said, Glenn. I'd like to say a few words too, and I'd firstly like to start by thanking the midwife who helped deliver me all those years ago.